Good evening, friends. Picture this, a small town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields. It's the kind of place where life moves at a snail's pace, where everyone knows each other by name, and where the air smells faintly of fresh hay and baked goods wafting from Maggie's diner. This diner? Oh, it's more than just four walls and a counter. It's the heart of the community. Run by Maggie Thompson, an elderly woman with silver hair tied neatly in a bun and hands that still bear the marks of decades spent kneading dough and flipping burgers. This place has seen better days. But Maggie keeps it alive as a tribute to her late husband, whose framed photo sits proudly near the register. His smile beams out, like he's saying, "Keep going, Maggie." And she does, even though business has been slow lately. You see, something dark has crept into this once peaceful town. A gang called the Iron Fangs has been extorting locals for months. They roll in on their loud motorcycles, demand money under the guise of protection, and leave behind trails of fear. No one dares stand up to them, not even the police. Calls go unanswered, officers shrug it off, too scared to act. What chance does an old woman running a diner have? But then, one evening, two towering figures step inside Maggie's diner. Their presence commands attention, not because they're celebrities but because they exude strength and charisma. One is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, all broad shoulders and confident strides. The other? John Cena, equally imposing, with a calm intensity in his eyes. These two aren't here for fame or fortune. They're traveling incognito, taking a break from Hollywood glitz to enjoy some peace on the open road. They order food, exchanging warm smiles with Maggie. She confides how her late husband admired them, how he watched every match, every movie, and even joined a gym at 65 to be strong like them. For a moment, it feels like just another peaceful night. The clinking of forks, the hum of conversation, the soft glow of warm daylight streaming through the windows, it's almost harmonious. Almost. Because trouble? Well, trouble has a knack for finding good people. And tonight, it's about to knock on the door. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the diner's worn wooden floors. Outside, the golden hour bathed the town in a warm, nostalgic glow, the kind of light that makes even the simplest moments feel cinematic. But inside Maggie's diner, the atmosphere was shifting. The laughter and warmth from earlier were still there, but now they carried an undercurrent of tension, like a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Dwayne and John sat at their corner table, plates nearly empty, savoring the last bites of Maggie's hearty meal. Her husband's framed photo caught the fading sunlight, his smile glowing faintly as if he were watching over them. It felt peaceful, for a moment. Then came the sound that shattered it all. A low rumble echoed through the streets, growing louder with each passing second. At first it seemed distant, almost harmless, but then it hit, a cacophony of roaring engines slicing through the quiet evening air. 5 leather-clad bikers strutted into the diner, boots thud-ang against the polished floor. Their leader, Razor Kane, removed his sunglasses with deliberate slowness, revealing cold, calculating eyes. He scanned the room with a sneer, his voice dripping with amusement. "Well, well, well. Still here, old lady." The elderly woman stiffened, gripping the edge of the counter tightly. She didn't back down, though. Instead, she met his gaze head-on, her quiet defiance radiating despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "I told you before," she said firmly, "I'm not paying you a dime." Razor chuckled darkly, shaking his head. "See, that's the problem. We're giving you protection, sweetheart. And you're not showing any gratitude. That's not how business works." His tone turned icy, sending shivers down everyone's spines. Dwayne and John exchanged glances. This wasn't part of their plan. They had come for peace, not conflict. But as Razor pulled out a machete and drove it into a nearby table with a loud crack, something inside both men snapped. They couldn't just sit by while this bully terrorized an innocent woman. Standing up slowly, Dwayne wiped his mouth with a napkin, his towering frame commanding attention. "We don't like bullies," he said calmly, his voice steady yet firm. John followed suit, cracking his knuckles audibly. "And we really don't like threats," he added, his expression unyielding. The bikers laughed at first, mocking them. "Oh, this should be good." Razor scoffed, squinting as recognition dawned on him. "Wait a second, I know you too. You're those Hollywood guys pretending to be tough heroes." He smirked, gesturing toward his men. "Hate to break it to ya, boys, but this ain't no movie." Dwayne took a step forward, his sheer presence making the bikers shift uncomfortably. "You're right," he said evenly. "It's not a movie." John smirked, crossing his arms. "But it might just be the worst night of your lives." For a brief moment, the bikers hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their arrogant grins. Then Razor scowled, pointing a gloved finger at Maggie. All right. You win this round, tough guys. But we'll be back tonight." His voice dropped to a menacing growl. "If you don't have our money by then, you can kiss this place goodbye." With that, the gang turned and strode out, slamming the door behind them. The low rumble of their motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Maggie exhaled shakily, gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. "They've been doing this for months," she admitted, her voice trembling. "At first, I thought they'd leave me alone. But every time I refused, they came back, scaring off my customers." Her sentence trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. Dwayne and John exchanged another look, this one filled with resolve. Not anymore. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of fiery orange and deep crimson. Inside Maggie's diner, the golden hour light softened the edges of everything it touched, the polished wooden tables, the framed photo of Maggie's late husband, even the worry lines etched into her face. But no amount of warm light could mask the tension thickening in the air. Dwayne and John stood near the counter, their towering figures casting long shadows across the room. They weren't just visitors anymore, they were protectors. And as protectors, they needed a plan. Maggie hesitated before speaking, her voice trembling but resolute. "You boys don't have to do this. This isn't your fight." Her hands gripped the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles turned white. John leaned against the counter, his expression calm but firm. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you remind me of my own mother. She ran a small cafe too, worked hard every day to keep it going. If she had people like that breathing down her neck, I'd want someone to stand up for her." Dwayne nodded, running a hand over his shaved head. "And I know what it's like to feel powerless against bullies. I was a kid once, watching people I cared about get pushed around. I promised myself I'd never let it happen again. So yeah, this is our fight now." A tear welled up in Maggie's eye, but she quickly wiped it away and smiled weakly. "My husband would have loved you too." John cracked his knuckles, shifting gears. "So what's the plan? We know they're coming back tonight. Do we call the police again or handle it ourselves?" Maggie sighed heavily, shaking her head. "The police won't do anything. If anything, they might warn the gang instead. That's how bad it is around here." Dwayne exhaled slowly, glancing around the diner. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking inventory of potential tools they could use. The place was small but sturdy, the tables were thick wood, the floors solid. It wouldn't be easy for the bikers to wreck without a fight. "We need to fortify this place," Dwayne said firmly. "Make sure they can't sneak in from behind. John, check the windows. Maggie, show us where the back door leads." John moved toward the front windows, inspecting them carefully. They'll probably come through the front again, but if they're serious about making an example out of this place, they might try something bigger. Maggie nodded nervously, leading Dwayne to the back door. It opened into a narrow alley littered with graffiti, one of the gang's calling cards from months earlier. "This is where they spray-painted my walls last time," she admitted quietly. Dwayne looked thoughtful, pacing the length of the alley. "We'll block this entrance somehow. If they try sneaking in from behind, we'll be ready." Back inside, John smirked, cracking his neck. "And if they come through the front? Well, I don't mind giving them a proper welcome." Maggie shook her head, though there was a flicker of amusement in her tired eyes. "I don't know whether to be grateful or worried about you two." Dwayne flashed a grin. "A little bit of both is fine." As the hours passed, the trio worked together to prepare for the inevitable showdown. Dwayne dragged one of the heavy wooden tables to reinforce the back door, while John used metal trays and chairs to create makeshift barricades near the windows. Maggie rummaged through the kitchen, pulling out anything that could double as a weapon: a rolling pin, a cast-iron skillet, even a fire extinguisher. Outside, the town grew eerily quiet. Too quiet. The only sounds came from the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the cool night breeze. The golden hour faded into twilight, and soon the diner was illuminated only by the soft glow of lamps inside. Shadows danced on the walls, adding an almost surreal quality to the scene. Dwayne glanced at his watch. Midnight wasn't far off. He turned to Maggie, who sat nervously at the counter, clutching the baseball bat she'd retrieved earlier. "You should stay back when they come," he instructed gently. "Let us handle them." She nodded reluctantly, though her grip on the bat tightened. "Just promise me one thing," she said softly. "Don't let them take this place from me. It's all I have left of him." Dwayne placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Not gonna happen, ma'am." John joined them, cracking his knuckles one last time. "Showtime's almost here. Let's give them a night to remember." The sound of engines roared in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Dwayne and John exchanged a final glance, their expressions unreadable but their resolve unshakable. Outside, headlights pierced the darkness, casting long shadows against the pavement. The gang had arrived, and they weren't alone. Instead of 5 bikers, there were 10, clad in leather and chains, their faces twisted with arrogance. Dwayne stepped forward, blocking the doorway like an immovable mountain. "You had your fun," he said evenly, his voice cutting through the night. "Now it's over. Walk away." The leader scoffed, adjusting his gloves. "Or what? You'll wrestle us?" John smirked, folding his arms. "You guys always have the same lines. It's getting boring." The leader's expression hardened. "I don't think you understand. This isn't a game. We run this town. When we say jump, people ask how high. And when we say pay, people open their wallets. You think you two meatheads are going to change that?" Dwayne clenched his fists. "You're done here." The leader smirked. "I don't think so. You two are outnumbered. We've been running this place for years. Nobody stops us." John cracked his neck, pointing at himself and Dwayne. "That's what you're dealing with, an undefeated streak." For the first time, hesitation flickered in the leader's eyes. But then he growled, shoving aside his doubts. "Enough talk. Take them down." The gang surged forward, boots thudding against the pavement as they closed in, forming a semicircle around the entrance to the diner. The roar of their engines still echoed in the night, but now it was drowned out by the heavy tension between the two sides. Dwayne and John didn't flinch. They stood there, grounded, their broad frames blocking the doorway like immovable mountains. The night air crackled with tension as Dwayne and John stood shoulder to shoulder at the diner's entrance. Their towering frames blocked the doorway like an impenetrable wall, muscles taut and ready for whatever came next. Outside, the gang leader, Razor Kane, adjusted his gloves, his sneer widening into a full-blown smirk. "Well, well," Razor drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like the old lady got herself some bodyguards." His men chuckled darkly, spreading out in a semicircle around the diner. Their boots scuffed against the pavement, chains jingling ominously. It was clear they weren't just here to collect money anymore. They wanted revenge. Dwayne didn't flinch. He stepped forward slightly, his expression unreadable but firm. "You had your fun," he said evenly, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Now it's over. Walk away." The gang erupted into laughter, their arrogance unchecked. One of the bikers called out, "Or what? You gonna wrestle us?" Another chimed in, pointing at John, "Yeah, you think this is one of your movies?" John cracked his neck, folding his arms across his chest. "You guys always have the same lines," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Then louder, addressing the group, "It's getting boring." Razor's grin faltered for a split second, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. But he quickly masked it, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "I don't think you understand," he spat, jabbing a finger toward them. "This isn't a game. We run this town. When we say jump, people ask how high. And when we say pay," he paused dramatically, leaning in, "people open their wallets." Dwayne clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "You're done here." Razor scoffed, regaining his bravado. "I don't think so." He gestured to his crew behind him. "You two are outnumbered. We've been running this place for years. Nobody stops us." John raised an eyebrow, exchanging a quick glance with Dwayne before turning back to Razor. "Ever heard of an undefeated streak?" he asked casually, tapping his temple. "That's what you're dealing with." For the first time since arriving, hesitation flickered in Razor's cold eyes. But then he growled, shoving aside any doubt. "Enough talk," he barked, raising a fist. "Take them down." What followed was chaos. The bikers surged forward, weapons flashing in the dim streetlights, chains, pipes, brass knuckles, all aimed squarely at Dwayne and John. But these two weren't ordinary men, they were forces of nature. Every movement calculated, every strike deliberate. The first attacker, a burly biker with tattoos snaking up his arms, lunged at Dwayne, swinging a thick chain toward his face. Dwayne reacted instantly, ducking beneath the swing and grabbing the man's wrist mid-motion. With sheer power, he twisted the biker's arm, yanking him forward, and delivered a devastating spinebuster that sent the man crashing onto the hood of a nearby car. The impact echoed through the night, leaving the biker groaning in pain on the ground. Meanwhile, another biker charged at John, wielding a metal pipe. Before the weapon could connect, John intercepted it with one hand, gripping it effortlessly and yanking it free from the attacker's grasp. In one fluid motion, he flipped the biker over his shoulder and slammed him onto the asphalt with an attitude adjustment. The crowd gasped audibly as the man lay sprawled, unconscious. But the fight wasn't slowing down. Two more bikers circled Dwayne, one brandishing a crowbar while the other moved in stealthily from behind. The first swung wildly, aiming for Dwayne's ribs, but he caught the weapon midair, driving a powerful elbow into the man's gut. As the biker doubled over, Dwayne lifted him clean off the ground and executed a punishing rock bottom, slamming him hard onto the pavement. The second biker tried tackling him from behind, but Dwayne spun at the last second, sending the man flying with a perfectly timed Samoan drop. John, meanwhile, was dealing with his own set of attackers. One lunged at him from behind, locking his arms around John's waist in a desperate attempt to restrain him. Without missing a beat, John threw his head back, smashing it into the attacker's nose. Blood spurted as the man stumbled backward, clutching his face. Seizing the moment, John grabbed him by the collar and hurled him across the sidewalk with a thunderous F5 suplex. Another biker swung at him with brass knuckles, but John dodged the blow and countered with a brutal five-knuckle shuffle, his fist colliding with the man's jaw and dropping him like a sack of bricks. From inside the diner, Maggie watched with wide eyes, her heart pounding. She gripped the baseball bat tightly, torn between awe and fear. Outside, the townspeople who had gathered cautiously peered from their windows or crept closer, phones in hand, recording everything. Razor Cane stared in disbelief as his gang fell one by one. His confidence wavered, but desperation took hold. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a switchblade, flicking it open with a sharp click. "Enough of this," he snarled, locking eyes with Dwayne. Before Razor could take another step, John stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Bad move," John muttered, grabbing Razor's wrist mid-strike. Razor thrashed, trying to pull free, but John's grip was ironclad. Effortlessly, he twisted Razor's arm and drove him face-first into the wooden porch with a crushing STF submission hold. Razor struggled, but it was futile. Defeated, he collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. One final biker tried crawling away unnoticed, bloodied and bruised. Dwayne noticed him immediately, striding over and grabbing him by the collar. Lifting him into the air with ease, Dwayne growled, "You forgot something." With that, he slammed the man onto the hood of a parked motorcycle, triggering its alarm. The blaring noise punctuated the end of the fight. The night air crackled with tension as Dwayne and John stood shoulder to shoulder at the diner's entrance. Their towering frames blocked the doorway like an impenetrable wall, muscles taut and ready for whatever came next. Outside, the gang leader, Razor Cane, adjusted his gloves, his sneer widening into a full-blown smirk. "Well, well," Razor drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like the old lady got herself some bodyguards." His men chuckled darkly, spreading out in a semicircle around the diner. Their boots scuffed against the pavement, chains jingling ominously. It was clear they weren't just here to collect money anymore. They wanted revenge. Dwayne didn't flinch. He stepped forward slightly, his expression unreadable but firm. "You had your fun," he said evenly, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Now it's over. Walk away." The gang erupted into laughter, their arrogance unchecked. One of the bikers called out, "Or what? You gonna wrestle us?" Another chimed in, pointing at John, "Yeah, you think this is one of your movies?" John cracked his neck, folding his arms across his chest. "You guys always have the same lines," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. Then louder, addressing the group, "It's getting boring." Razor's grin faltered for a split second, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. But he quickly masked it, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "I don't think you understand," he spat, jabbing a finger toward them. "This isn't a game. We run this town. When we say jump, people ask how high. And when we say pay," he paused dramatically, leaning in, "people open their wallets." Dwayne clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "You're done here." Razor scoffed, regaining his bravado. "I don't think so." He gestured to his crew behind him. "You two are outnumbered. We've been running this place for years. Nobody stops us." John raised an eyebrow, exchanging a quick glance with Dwayne before turning back to Razor. "Ever heard of an undefeated streak?" he asked casually, tapping his temple. "That's what you're dealing with." For the first time since arriving, hesitation flickered in Razor's cold eyes. But then he growled, shoving aside any doubt. "Enough talk," he barked, raising a fist. "Take them down." What followed was chaos. The bikers surged forward, weapons flashing in the dim streetlights, chains, pipes, brass knuckles, all aimed squarely at Dwayne and John. But these two weren't ordinary men, they were forces of nature. Every movement calculated, every strike deliberate. The first attacker, a burly biker with tattoos snaking up his arms, lunged at Dwayne, swinging a thick chain toward his face. Dwayne reacted instantly, ducking beneath the swing and grabbing the man's wrist mid-motion. With sheer power, he twisted the biker's arm, yanking him forward, and delivered a devastating spinebuster that sent the man crashing onto the hood of a nearby car. The impact echoed through the night, leaving the biker groaning in pain on the ground. Meanwhile, another biker charged at John, wielding a metal pipe. Before the weapon could connect, John intercepted it with one hand, gripping it effortlessly and yanking it free from the attacker's grasp. In one fluid motion, he flipped the biker over his shoulder and slammed him onto the asphalt with an attitude adjustment. The crowd gasped audibly as the man lay sprawled, unconscious. But the fight wasn't slowing down. Two more bikers circled Dwayne, one brandishing a crowbar while the other moved in stealthily from behind. The first swung wildly, aiming for Dwayne's ribs, but he caught the weapon midair, driving a powerful elbow into the man's gut. As the biker doubled over, Dwayne lifted him clean off the ground and executed a punishing rock bottom, slamming him hard onto the pavement. The second biker tried tackling him from behind, but Dwayne spun at the last second, sending the man flying with a perfectly timed Samoan drop. John, meanwhile, was dealing with his own set of attackers. One lunged at him from behind, locking his arms around John's waist in a desperate attempt to restrain him. Without missing a beat, John threw his head back, smashing it into the attacker's nose. Blood spurted as the man stumbled backward, clutching his face. Seizing the moment, John grabbed him by the collar and hurled him across the sidewalk with a thunderous F5 suplex. Another biker swung at him with brass knuckles, but John dodged the blow and countered with a brutal five-knuckle shuffle, his fist colliding with the man's jaw and dropping him like a sack of bricks. From inside the diner, Maggie watched with wide eyes, her heart pounding. She gripped the baseball bat tightly, torn between awe and fear. Outside, the townspeople who had gathered cautiously peered from their windows or crept closer, phones in hand, recording everything. Razor Cane stared in disbelief as his gang fell one by one. His confidence wavered, but desperation took hold. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a switchblade, flicking it open with a sharp click. "Enough of this," he snarled, locking eyes with Dwayne. Before Razor could take another step, John stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Bad move," John muttered, grabbing Razor's wrist mid-strike. Razor thrashed, trying to pull free, but John's grip was ironclad. Effortlessly, he twisted Razor's arm and drove him face-first into the wooden porch with a crushing STF submission hold. Razor struggled, but it was futile. Defeated, he collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. One final biker tried crawling away unnoticed, bloodied and bruised. Dwayne noticed him immediately, striding over and grabbing him by the collar. Lifting him into the air with ease, Dwayne growled, "You forgot something." With that, he slammed the man onto the hood of a parked motorcycle, triggering its alarm. The blaring noise punctuated the end of the fight. The night air crackled with a mix of adrenaline and relief as the last of the gang members were hauled into the back of police cruisers. Red and blue lights bathed the diner's exterior, reflecting off shattered glass, dented tables, and scuffed pavement. It was a scene straight out of chaos, but now it felt like redemption. Dwayne and John stood side by side near the entrance, their towering figures silhouetted against the flashing lights. Their faces were calm but weary, their breathing steady despite the intensity of what had just unfolded. For them, This wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about doing what was right. But as they watched the officers secure the scene, they couldn't help but notice something remarkable happening around them. The elderly woman, Maggie, stood on the porch, clutching her baseball bat tightly in one hand and wiping tears from her eyes with the other. She looked at the defeated bikers being shoved into squad cars, her expression shifting from disbelief to triumph. "Not so tough now, are you?" she muttered under her breath, her voice shaking but filled with newfound confidence. One officer, a tall man with graying temples and a hardened expression, approached cautiously. His gaze darted between Maggie, Dwayne, and John before finally landing on the carnage scattered across the street. He let out a low whistle. "Looks like y'all had quite the party here," he said dryly, though there was an undertone of admiration in his voice. John smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. "They started it." The officer sighed, rubbing his temple as if bracing himself for yet another mess to clean up. "Look, I'm not saying I don't appreciate what you did here. Lord knows these guys have been a thorn in our side for years, but this town has a way of sweeping things under the rug. If we're gonna make sure this sticks, I need statements. Witnesses. Evidence." Dwayne's jaw tightened slightly, but his expression softened as he glanced around the growing crowd. What he saw made him smile faintly. The townspeople who had been too afraid to step forward earlier were now emerging from the shadows, clutching their phones, eager to share videos, photos, and testimonies. Some even stepped closer, pointing accusing fingers at the gang leader, still slumped against a cruiser, glaring daggers at everyone. "They've been shaking us down for years," one man shouted, his work uniform stained with grease but his voice full of conviction. "These thugs robbed my store last month." A young mother holding her daughter's hand nodded vigorously. "And they slashed my tires when I refused to pay them. We all heard them threaten to burn down this diner tonight." The officer raised a hand to quiet the rising chorus of voices. All right," he said firmly, nodding. "That makes things easier." He turned back to the gang leader, who spat blood onto the ground, his face twisted with hatred. "You've been a plague on this town long enough. Now we've got witnesses, footage, and more than enough reasons to keep you behind bars." The leader sneered, leaning forward slightly despite his restraints. "You think this changes anything? Someone else will take our place. You 2-inch, he pointed a bruised finger at Dwayne and John, "think you're heroes, but you're just passing through. This town still belongs to people like us." Dwayne crouched down, his dark eyes locking onto the gang leaders. His tone was calm but carried a weight that silenced the man instantly. "Not anymore." John folded his arms, stepping closer. "Seems like the town's decided it's done being afraid of you." The officer signaled for the remaining bikers to be loaded into the cruisers. As they were dragged to their feet, groaning and clutching their injuries, the gang leader locked eyes with Dwayne one final time. There was no fear in his gaze, only venom, but Dwayne met it head-on, unmoving. The car door slammed shut, sealing the gang away for good. As the sound of sirens faded into the distance, the town seemed to exhale collectively. The once empty streets came alive again, not with fear but with hope. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, whispering excitedly, some even approaching Maggie to offer hugs and words of support. One man brought over a toolbox, offering to help repair the damage caused during the fight. Another handed her a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked along the way. Maggie stood on the porch, overwhelmed by the sudden outpouring of kindness. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to Dwayne and John. "I still can't believe it," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It's really over." Dwayne smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It was over the moment you decided to stand your ground. You're the real hero here, Maggie." John nodded, clapping his hands together. "Now that the bad guys are gone, How about we actually finish that meal? Maggie blinked, then laughed, a genuine laugh, the kind she hadn't shared in months. Shaking her head, she wiped her hands on her apron. You two really don't change, do you? Inside the diner, life began to return to normal, or rather, better than normal. The door swung open repeatedly as curious townsfolk ventured inside, drawn by the promise of safety and community. A man who had been too afraid to enter the diner weeks ago took a seat at the counter. A young couple sat in a booth near the window, sharing plates of food and laughter. Slowly but surely, Maggie's diner transformed into what it always should have been, a hub of connection, warmth, and resilience. Maggie moved behind the counter with renewed purpose, grabbing fresh plates of food for Dwayne and John. You boys earned this, she said proudly, setting the steaming dishes in front of them. They dug in gratefully, savoring every bite. Outside, the abandoned motorcycles sat untouched, their owners long gone, their purpose lost. The town had changed tonight, and so had its people. John lifted his coffee cup in a silent toast. Dwayne mirrored the gesture, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. Justice had been served. The morning sun rose slowly over the small town, casting a golden glow that seemed to wash away the shadows of fear and despair. It wasn't just another day, it felt like a rebirth. The air smelled fresher, the streets quieter but alive with possibility. Gone was the heaviness that had weighed on everyone for so long. In its place was a sense of renewal. Maggie's diner buzzed with activity once again. Word had spread quickly about what happened the night before, not just among those who witnessed it firsthand, but throughout the entire town. People came from all corners to see if the rumors were true. Had the gang really been defeated? Was Maggie safe? And most importantly, were these two larger-than-life figures still around? By sunrise, the diner was already filling up. Neighbors greeted each other warmly as they entered, some shaking hands, others exchanging hugs. For months, many had avoided even looking at one another out of fear or shame. Now conversations flowed freely, laughter filled the room, and plates clinked against tables as orders piled up. Maggie moved behind the counter with a spring in her step she hadn't felt in years. Her smile reached her eyes now, no longer forced or tinged with sadness. Every time someone complimented her cooking, or simply said thank you, she nodded humbly, tears threatening to spill over. This wasn't just a victory for her, it was a triumph for the entire community. Dwayne and John sat at their usual table near the window, finishing their breakfast. They weren't eating alone this time. Half the diner seemed determined to stop by and express their gratitude. One man, wearing grease-stained overalls, leaned down to shake Dwayne's hand firmly. "You boys didn't just save Maggie," he said gruffly, emotion thick in his voice. "You saved us." A young mother approached next, clutching her daughter's hand tightly. She looked at John with watery eyes. "I haven't slept through the night since they slashed my tires last month," she admitted. "But I think I can finally rest easy now." Her little girl grinned shyly, waving a tiny hand at Dwayne. He chuckled, giving her an exaggerated wink that made her giggle. John watched the scene unfold, leaning back in his chair. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he asked quietly, turning to Dwayne. Dwayne nodded, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "Yeah, it does. But it's not us they're thanking. Not really. We just gave them permission to believe in themselves again." As the morning wore on, the atmosphere inside the diner grew lighter, almost celebratory. Strangers became friends, sharing stories and laughter over plates of Maggie's famous biscuits and gravy. The walls of the diner seemed to breathe easier too, as if the building itself could feel the weight lifting. One customer, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and calloused hands, stood up suddenly, raising his coffee cup high. "To Maggie!" he called out, his voice booming across the room. Everyone turned to look at him, curious. And to the two men who reminded us we don't have to live in fear anymore. The crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly. Maggie blushed furiously, ducking her head as Dwayne and John stood up awkwardly, waving off the attention. "It's not about us," Dwayne insisted, though there was a hint of pride in his tone. "It's about you. About all of you standing together." John added, "Strong men and women. Protect those who can't protect themselves. That's what your town did last night." The applause continued, echoing off the wooden walls. Outside, under the bright sunlight, the abandoned motorcycles sat untouched, their owners long gone, their purpose lost. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. They represented a past best left behind. Before leaving, Dwayne and John took one final seat at the corner table, savoring the last bites of their meal. Maggie brought them fresh cups of coffee, setting them down with a soft clink. "You boys earned this," she said proudly, her voice steady despite the tears still glistening in her eyes. They dug in gratefully, savoring every bite. Outside, the once empty streets came alive again, not with fear but with hope. Neighbors stepped out of their homes, whispering excitedly, some even approaching Maggie to offer hugs and words of support. One man brought over a toolbox, offering to help repair the damage caused during the fight. Another handed her a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked along the way. Maggie stood on the porch, overwhelmed by the sudden outpouring of kindness. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to Dwayne and John. "I still can't believe it," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It's really over." Dwayne smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It was over the moment you decided to stand your ground. You're the real hero here, Maggie." John nodded, clapping his hands together. "Now that the bad guys are gone, how about we actually finish that meal?" Maggie blinked, then laughed, a genuine laugh, the kind she hadn't shared in months. Shaking her head, she wiped her hands on her apron. "You two really don't change, do you?" The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and deep orange. Dwayne and John cruised down an open highway, their truck humming steadily beneath them. The windows were rolled down slightly, letting in a cool breeze that carried the faint scent of rain from a storm that had passed hours earlier. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind in the small town. But peace, as they both knew too well, never lasted long for men like them. They pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of yet another quiet town. This one seemed unremarkable at first glance, just a cluster of buildings surrounded by sprawling farmland. A faded sign read Joe's Quick Stop, its neon letters flickering weakly. Inside, a bored cashier leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone while the hum of a vending machine filled the silence. Dwayne stepped out of the truck, stretching his arms above his head with a satisfied groan. "Man, I could use a snack," he said, glancing toward the convenience store. "You want anything?" John smirked, leaning back against the hood of the truck. "Yeah, grab me something sweet. You know how I get when I'm hangry." As Dwayne headed inside, John stayed behind, scanning the area lazily. His gaze drifted across the parking lot, taking in the few cars scattered around. Nothing unusual. Just your typical mid-afternoon lull. Or so it seemed. That's when he noticed him, a young boy walking out of the store, clutching a backpack tightly to his chest. He couldn't have been more than 12 or 13, wearing an oversized hoodie and scuffed sneakers. There was something about the way he moved, or rather didn't move, that caught John's attention. Instead of heading straight home, the boy hesitated near the edge of the parking lot, glancing over his shoulder repeatedly. His steps were hesitant, almost fearful. John frowned, narrowing his eyes. "What's got you spooked, kid?" he muttered under his breath. Moments later, two older teenagers emerged from an alleyway between the buildings. They swaggered confidently, their body language aggressive. One cracked his knuckles, the other smirked, clearly enjoying whatever game they were playing. Without hesitation, they approached the boy, cornering him near a row of parked cars. "Hey, we're talking to you," one of them growled, grabbing the boy's hoodie and yanking him closer. "You think you can skip out on us?" The boy stammered, his voice trembling. "I told you, I don't have anything. Please, just leave me alone." John pushed off the truck immediately, his expression hardening. Across the lot, Dwayne exited the store, snacks in hand, but froze when he saw the scene unfolding. Their eyes met briefly, and without needing to say a word, they sprang into action. Moving swiftly but silently, Dwayne and John closed the distance between themselves and the confrontation. By the time they reached the alley, the situation had escalated. The bullies had shoved the boy against the brick wall, his backpack slipping off his shoulder and landing in a puddle of muddy water. One of them loomed over him, sneering. "You owe us, punk. And you're gonna pay." Dwayne stepped forward, his towering frame casting a shadow over the group. "That's enough." The bullies turned sharply, startled by the sudden intrusion. Their confidence wavered as they took in the sheer size of the two men standing before them. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" one spat, though there was a noticeable tremor in his voice. John crossed his arms, his tone icy. "We're the guys who make sure bullies like you learn a lesson." The second bully tried to puff out his chest, attempting to salvage some semblance of bravado. "This ain't your business, man. Walk away." Dwayne cracked his knuckles audibly, his jaw tightening. "Funny thing is, it is our business now." For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a shared glance, the bullies released the boy and backed off, muttering threats under their breath. "You haven't seen the last of us," one shouted lamely as they retreated into the shadows. Once the coast was clear, John bent down to pick up the boy's backpack, handing it to him gently. "You okay, kid?" The boy nodded shakily, clutching the bag to his chest. "Why yeah, thank you." Dwayne studied him carefully, noting the fear still lingering in his wide eyes. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy replied softly, avoiding their gaze. "Well, Ethan," Dwayne said firmly, crouching down to meet him at eye level, "you don't ever let people push you around like that. Got it? Find someone who has your back, friends, family, teachers, and stand your ground. You're stronger than you think." Ethan looked up, surprise flickering in his expression. Slowly, he nodded. "Okay." John patted him on the shoulder reassuringly. "Get home safe, all right?" With that, Ethan slung his backpack over his shoulder and walked away, his posture noticeably straighter this time. He didn't look back. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of amber and deep orange as Dwayne and John cruised down a quiet highway. Their truck hummed steadily beneath them, the rhythmic sound blending with the soft breeze streaming through the open windows. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind in the small town. But peace, as they both knew too well, never lasted long for men like them. John leaned back against the passenger seat, his eyes following the endless horizon ahead. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them since leaving the diner. His tone wasn't urgent or tense, it was thoughtful, almost wistful. Dwayne glanced at him briefly before returning his focus to the road. "What do you mean? Next fight? Next town?" John shook his head, cracking a faint smile. "Nah, not just that. I mean, we keep stepping into these situations, helping people, fighting bullies, standing up when no one else will. But what happens when we're the ones who need backup? You ever think about that?" Dwayne's brow furrowed slightly as he considered the question. He didn't answer immediately, letting the hum of the engine fill the pause. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but contemplative. You saying we need to put together a team? John chuckled, waving a hand dismissively. Not exactly. But let's face it, everywhere we go, trouble finds us. Or maybe we find it. Either way, this doesn't feel like the last time we're gonna step in and handle a problem that isn't ours. Dwayne smirked, glancing sideways at his friend. We don't run from fights, that's the problem. Exactly, John agreed, nodding emphatically. And after last night, I can't help but think maybe we're not just passing through these places. Maybe we're leaving something behind. He gestured vaguely toward the rearview mirror, where the diner and the town had faded into the distance hours ago. People saw what happened. They saw two guys standing up for what's right. And now they know they can do the same. That town won't be the same after this. Not just because those bikers are gone. Dwayne tilted his head slightly, considering John's words. So you're saying what we do is bigger than just throwing punches? John shrugged, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. I'm saying people need examples. We gave them that. Maybe that's the real fight, the one that matters most. Not just stopping bad guys, but showing others how to stand up for themselves. The thought lingered between them as they drove through changing landscapes. Rolling farmland gave way to dense forests, then opened up again to reveal sweeping plains. Each place they passed had its own story, its own struggles. Somewhere in each one, there were people who needed a push to stand up for themselves, or someone to remind them they weren't alone. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky until it hung directly overhead, casting sharp shadows across the road. They made a quick stop at a gas station on the outskirts of yet another small town. The place was eerily quiet, almost too quiet, with only a few cars parked outside. As Dwayne filled up the tank, John leaned casually against the truck, sipping water from a bottle. His gaze drifted across the lot, landing on a young boy walking out of the convenience store across the street. The kid couldn't have been more than 12 or 13, wearing an oversized hoodie and scuffed sneakers. At first glance, he seemed unremarkable, but something about the way he moved caught John's attention. Heads up, John muttered, nudging Dwayne as he approached. Check out the kid. Dwayne followed his gaze, noticing the boy immediately. His shoulders were hunched, his steps hesitant, as if he were trying to avoid being noticed. Every few seconds, he glanced over his shoulder, checking the street behind him. There was tension in the way he moved, a nervous energy that didn't belong on someone so young. That's not just a kid heading home from school, Dwayne said quietly, his jaw tightening. Moments later, two older teenagers emerged from an alleyway and began following the boy. John pushed off the truck, his expression hardening. I've seen that look before. That kid's in trouble. Without hesitation, Dwayne capped the gas pump and joined him. Let's go. The road stretched endlessly before them, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The horizon was painted in hues of deep orange and purple, blending seamlessly into the encroaching darkness. Stars began to twinkle faintly above, their light a reminder of how vast, and yet interconnected, the world truly was. Dwayne and John sat in silence for a while, letting the hum of the engine and the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers fill the space between them. John leaned back against the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the endless ribbon of asphalt ahead. You know, he said finally, breaking the quiet, there's something about this life we lead. It's not just about stopping bad guys or throwing punches. It's bigger than that. Dwayne glanced at him briefly, one hand resting casually on the steering wheel. Yeah? What do you mean? John shrugged, his tone thoughtful but firm. I mean, every time we step in, whether it's saving a diner from thugs or helping a kid stand up to bullies, we leave something behind. We plant a seed, a reminder that people don't have to live in fear, that they can fight back. Dwayne nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the horizon. Strong men protect those who can't protect themselves. Isn't that what Maggie's husband used to say? Exactly, John agreed, nodding emphatically. And it's not just about strength, it's about courage. Standing up when no one else will. Showing others that they're capable of doing the same. The truck rumbled along the highway, passing through small towns and open fields. Each place they drove through seemed to whisper its own story, some filled with hope, others burdened by struggle. Somewhere out there, someone needed help. Someone needed a push to believe in themselves again. Hours passed, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They joked about Ethan's oversized hoodie, speculating whether the kid had borrowed it from an older sibling, or maybe even his dad. Kid looked like he was swimming in that thing, Dwayne chuckled, shaking his head. But hey, if it kept him warm. And hopefully safe now, John added, leaning forward slightly. He'll be okay though. You saw the way he walked away. Straighter. Stronger. Like he finally realized he didn't have to take crap from anyone. Dwayne smirked, tapping the steering wheel lightly. That's the best part of all this. Not just stopping the bad guys, but showing people they've got it in them to stand tall. John grinned, raising an imaginary toast. To standing tall, then. And to whatever comes next. As night fell completely, the landscape transformed under the cover of darkness. Streetlights flickered along lonely stretches of road, casting pools of golden light onto empty highways. The truck's headlights illuminated signs pointing toward distant cities and forgotten towns, each name a promise of new adventures, or challenges. Dwayne glanced at the fuel gauge, then at the map on his phone. Looks like we're running low. Next stop's a little town called Ridgewood. Ever heard of it? John shook his head, stretching his arms above his head. Nah, but I'm sure it's got its own problems waiting for us. Dwayne laughed, gripping the wheel tighter as the truck climbed a slight incline. Or maybe it's peaceful. Maybe nothing happens there except good food and friendly faces. John raised an eyebrow skeptically. Yeah, and maybe pigs fly. They shared a laugh, the sound echoing through the cab of the truck. For all their talk of justice and fighting evil, moments like these reminded them why they did what they did, not because they craved chaos, but because they believed in leaving the world better than they found it.
And that's where our story ends. What did you think of this story? Share your emotions in the comments below. We'd love to know what you remember most. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And if you are in the mood for another exciting story, check out our next video. It's waiting for you. Until then, stay curious, get inspired, and keep exploring the stories that make life extraordinary. See you in the next one.